Okay. Call this meeting in order. First item is roll call.
Alderman Arnold.
Here.
Alderman Bass.
Here.
Alderman Cleaver.
Here.
Alderman Knox.
Here.
Alderman Mills.
Here.
Alderman Skinner.
Here.
There's a quorum.
Next item be invocation led by Pastor Darrell Jones of Crossroads Church, followed by a pledge of allegiance from Alderman Cleaver.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, we are indeed grateful again that by our presence here tonight, we have breath, we have life, we have health. We have a great community, and we have an opportunity to work together for the betterment of our community. So I thank you for these leaders, elected officials, city staff, all the hard work that's been put into the agenda tonight to get it ready. The work that will be done tonight, God, I just pray that it would be one that's worked in harmony for the good of your people and for this community. We just pray your blessings on it all in the name of Jesus.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next up is the approval of the agenda.
No changes, Mayor.
Seeing no proclamations, move on to public comments. We ask the citizens to come forward to the podium microphone, and if you haven't signed in, please give your name and address for the record. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening? All right, seeing none, move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
And motion from Alderman Skinner to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Knox. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, seeing no previous business, move on to new business. First item under new business is Grand Valley Fair Beer Garden, September 8th and 9th, the Grand Valley Fair Association. Okay, and I can get this part started. This is just due to the being on city property, they need permission from the Board of Aldermen to allow the sale of alcohol in the beer garden, which is the pavilion location. Bow Country will actually be running that again this year, similar to last year. So for that, before they can apply, they'll have to come back to us for a liquor license. But before they can do that, they have to have permission from the landowner. Then once they get that, they can get the rest of their stuff together and come back to us for the approval of the actual liquor license. So I know we do have J.C. Stratton and Justin Tyson here from the Fair Association tonight. If anyone has any questions.
Is this any different than what we've done in the past?
No, same thing. They'll still have the area fenced off. There'll be signage, and they have two off-duty police officers there as well that they pay for. So I guess we'll be looking for a motion to give that permission, correct? I think. Because it has to be a written letter.
Yeah.
And I know Jamie said she,
Have
Yeah,
in the minutes
and
as a
the,
motion.
yeah, they have the letter ready, just need the permission from the board.
I'll make a motion.
Got a motion from Alderman Bass, I have a second.
Second.
Second, Alderman Knox. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. Next item under new business is discussion and possible action regarding discipline of an alderman. This is in response to a few board members reaching out regarding wanting to discuss possible discipline of what they feel might be interference of an elected official. And prior to that, then I will, it is related to a phone call that was made to the election board about the case that the city was in with the Jackson County Election Board. So with that, I will get started by just getting some questions out there on the record, some answers to these, and then we can discuss from there. So, Alderman Arnold, did you call the Jackson County Election Board?
Yes.
When did you call them?
a morning or two after the findings of judgment was on the case.
Was that before there was an update from our city attorney regarding the case?
I don't believe so.
What items did you discuss with them?
I just asked what their side of the situation was. I gave them nothing from our side. I have spoke with my legal representative, Mr. James Bauer, and explained him what occurred, and he stated that he sees nothing that I've done that's inappropriate. So
When you were talking to them, how did you introduce yourself or let them know who you were?
I gave full disclosure who I was and what my title was with the city.
In addition, have you discussed the vote that occurred in executive session with anyone?
That vote would be a matter of public information 72 hours after the vote was taken.
Mr. Mayor, that's incorrect. 72-hour rule for closed session votes applies only to employee matters.
All right. With that, then, I will open it up to questions or discussion from the board.
So based on the question that the mayor just asked you, did you disclose any of that information
What information?
on the voting? Exec session that you claim was public information.
Under my understanding, it was public information.
When did you disclose it?
Not real for sure.
Estimated time?
Couldn't give you that.
To who did you disclose it to?
I'm not sure if I did.
You say you're not sure that you discussed it with people, but yet Chuck got on social media and posted that you were the only one that voted against it.
That may have been.
And the only way he could have known that would have been coming from you.
Well, I still say that no malice of any intent of anything. And my legal representation has told me that I hadn't violated anything on these topics when I spoke with him. If the board takes offense to that, I apologize. I know there's been times that we have not agreed on the issues, and but my efforts were only to do my job as an alderman, to find fact-finding, to find information to help me make my decisions as we move forward.
So did you tell Chuck the vote that we took?
It may have come out in a conversation, to tell you the truth, because it was my understanding that it was information that was available 72 hours after that vote was taken. Now, it may have been an error in my understanding, and if that is the case.
Joe, can you give us more background into what the difference of the normal 72 hours compared to what this is? Because I'm not an expert on it here.
With respect, so again, the 72-hour question has to do with strictly with personnel matters. So if so personnel matters, if an employee is being hired, fired, disciplined, promoted, those types of discussions can occur in a closed session when it is an employee. When elected officials are not employees, so we can't go into closed session for those. When you make a decision in closed session, what the Sunshine Law says is you have to let the employee know about the matter as soon as possible after the close of the meeting, and then you have to make available to the public the vote within 72 hours. There are other rules that apply under the Sunshine Law with respect to when a vote is or is not to be disclosed. Specifically, if you have a contract, for example, you may go into closed session to negotiate the terms of a contract, And then your actions on that contract are then made public at a point once the contract has been signed by both parties and essentially the negotiations stop. With respect to this matter, it was a matter of litigation. The city had sued the Jackson County Election Board. Alderman Arnold called the opposing party in the case at some point, even prior to receiving information from our firm, as I understand it. And at that point, the city still had the possibility to appeal the decision that had been made, and that decision to whether to do that or not had not been taken at that point.
So how long after that decision, do we know when that decision was made from the city's perspective, when we decided not to appeal? 'Cause you're saying we have 72 hours after that decision. Is that my reading?
No, there is no 72-hour
There's
rule with
nothing
respect
after.
to this issue.
It's, yeah.
So at this point, it's a matter of litigation, and the closed session information is not to be revealed. And I believe at this point now, the time for the board to appeal has now run. However, it was 30 days essentially after the decision was made final, which I believe was on the 6th of February.
So at no time we could disclose that.
When it comes to closed meetings, closed records, closed votes, the controller of whether something is closed for the city is a vote of the Board of Aldermen. Now, that vote could have come in the form of an ordinance at some time long in the past where the board set the rules for what is or isn't closed, but the city has a policy that says that anything that can be closed under the Sunshine Law is closed. Without having a rule like that, if you're in the situation where every time that you created a closed document, like something to do with terminating an employee or something like that, this board would have to gather to vote on every single one of those. So in order to make a vote that was closed, done in a closed session, which you can do for litigation decisions, that in order to release that, the details of that vote, that would have required permission from the Board of Aldermen to do that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but even if you're looking at going back to going back to like employee ones with the 72 hours, it really shouldn't be anybody on the board releasing that information anyways, right? That should come through an official request of the city, right?
It would, in that circumstance, it could come through a request of the city. By law, by statute, in that circumstance, a decision by the Board of Aldermen is made open 72 hours after the close of the hearing. It doesn't mean you have to expressly, put it out or take any, active method to put it out, but if someone did request, they could request it and we would have to provide that information.
This may have been from a conversation that I didn't state I voted that way, that I stated that I wasn't in favor of it. He might have assumed that, because I don't remember stating that.
Well, kind of what it sounds to me is some private information was divulged from a private meeting, an executive session meeting, and that information should not have been divulged because it's not under any 72-hour law or anything like that, and it wasn't, personnel. So private information was divulged, what it sounds to me, correct? In the conversation, to know what went on in the meeting as far as voting goes.
So not only was it released, but then it's also put on Facebook. Let me ask you this. Is this the first time that you have released information, or has anybody ever advised you before about discussing private information in closed session?
No.
I guess the nagging question I have is why was the phone call made in the first place instead of checking with city staff, checking with our legal team, before making that phone call. I mean, you could have got your answers from our people, from our staff, our legal team, and never divulged anything.
It was a fact-finding phone call. It was nothing I ever thought would be a problem to make that phone call. The case had been ruled. Being a layman, I wasn't aware of a time lag for appeal, but the email had come out that they weren't going to go for an appeal. So,
Well, again, why wouldn't you reach out to our people and ask the question, hey, what are we doing? What do you think?
that phone call had been reached out. I didn't get a call for 2 days after that.
Did you talk to anybody else on the board about it?
No. It was one of those things, I didn't think it was a problem with it. So it was just me feeling I was doing what I'm allowed to do as an alderman, to find information that allows me and keeps me educated to make the best decisions I can for the citizens that elected me.
Joe, do you recall when the email was sent out from your staff regarding,
I don't have that information
was it
specifically.
like, I mean,
I
we got
believe-
notified
I
the night
believe that-
before, and then you guys emailed
Right, I believe
before
that
into the
that
next business day, right?
order was issued on the 6th. I believe that I had placed a call to Mr. Murphy on the evening of the 6th to let him know that it had come out. And I believe that we sent the email out within 2 days of that, so the 7th or the 8th, without finding the actual email in my file. Mayor, if I could, I would like to clarify, or at least put a finer point on a question for Alderman Skinner. I didn't have the information pulled up on my screen here, but I do have it. With respect to litigation matters, legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving a public governmental body, the Sunshine Law says any minutes, vote, or settlement agreement relating to legal actions, causes of action, or litigation, shall be made public upon final disposition of the matter voted upon. And again, to the point that at the time that we sent the email to the Board of Aldermen, you still had up to actually 30 days from the date that the order was issued to make a decision about whether or not to appeal it. It was clearly not final at that point.
So it wouldn't have been filed till like March 6th then, probably.
I didn't do the math on that, but that would be
March 6th,
roughly
March 5th, whatever, something
a
like that.
28-day
Basically a day
month,
after
February,
that.
so it could have been shorter.
When
So I'm
did
going
that
to ask
conversation-
a off-the-wall question. Alderman Arnold, you stated several times, and this isn't the first time that you have said that you've talked to your own counsel. Could I ask why you've never talked to our city attorney about any of this?
He's told me he's not our lawyer, he's the city's lawyer, and so I went and sought my own lawyer. He's been clear about that with us and the board, that he represents the city and doesn't represent the alderman.
Dale, when did you have the conversation with Chuck that you may have just expressed your viewpoint of this?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. We talk on occasion from time to time, so what particular day it was, I couldn't tell you.
Was it before you called the county?
Oh, no.
It was after. It was after?
I believe, yeah. I'd like to say I can't be for sure, but
I guess that's more my concern is, you know, the private information that was divulged, you know, from a private vote and then shows up on social media. That's, you know, bigger concern because obviously, as we know, things that go on in executive session gets out in public, could get the city into a, you know, lawsuit or something down the road, you know, when it pertains to businesses and other things that you know, we have to discuss and decide. So that's more concerning to me.
And no one probably knows what
And the
date.
person we're talking about has a proven track record of disclosing executive session information, so we know that if it got to him, he wouldn't have had an issue disclosing it. Which bothers me even more, that we're having this discussion with this person who was censored less than a year ago for letting out executive session information. So, I mean, we're having a discussion. I get that maybe you're saying you didn't tell him the exact vote, but he knew the exact vote. He wouldn't have known. I've not had a conversation with Chuck Johnson about how I voted in executive session. Did anybody else on the board?
No,
have a
somehow he knew
conversation?
I voted yes.
I didn't have that discussion. So, I mean, he got it from somebody.
Assumption on his part.
Well, that's a pretty good assumption when he puts on social media that you were the only one that voted against it, and that was his words.
That may have been.
When we
I'm
go-
very disconcerted about how every answer is just a simple matter of fact versus a given fact. Everything might have been, could have been. I don't know. I don't recall. Were you advised to answer that way?
I don't want to get into a long debate or discussion about all the things that were discussed with me and my attorney. There are things he told me that would bear here maybe, but would just, I think, impugn the feelings that some of you have now. So,
So you know, basically, you probably crossed the line far enough that you felt the need to seek counsel and be
No.
advised to zip it.
after the conversation the other night, I had some concerns that maybe I had crossed the line. So I went and spoke with an attorney to find out where I stood and told him what had occurred, and he gave me his advice, as a 20-year municipal lawyer,
Is this the first time you crossed the line?
as far as I know.
I'll bring up your memory on Facebook on blocking people from your Alderman page.
I don't have an Alderman page. I think the instance you're talking about is on a Ward 1.
Ward 1 post.
That's not my page. I don't administer it. I don't have any control over it,
But you did block some people.
because the conversation was going
Okay.
to a negative side, and
All right.
there was nothing in violation of any political rules there of doing that block. Because it's not my page and I'm not in charge of it.
Well, I mean, I disagree with you on that, for sure.
I do too.
If you're in your capacity and you're talking about a decision that was made and you were the one making it in your capacity as an alderman, and then when the conversation turns and you don't like the conversation anymore and you turn the comments off, you can't do that. Even if it's not your official alderman page, if you're talking about a viewpoint you took in your official capacity as an alderman, and then you turn off the comments and don't allow everybody else in the public to disagree with you publicly, that takes away everybody's First Amendment right. You can't do that. Shouldn't people be allowed to disagree with you?
They can, and they have, and
But not on that post.
on that particular post, I intended to put it up where comments weren't allowed from the very beginning. It was just an informational post for people in the Ward 1. I didn't want to see a lot of.
There's quite a bit of case law that would, I'm not a lawyer, but I think there's quite a bit of case law out there that would say that that's a violation of everybody's First Amendment rights. If you're posting on your, talking about your kid's graduation or something, you can turn off your comments, but we're talking about votes that were taken and your disagreement with all of us, and I couldn't even comment and respond to you because you turned the comments off. So, I mean, you violated my First Amendment right, not being able to defend myself, or anybody who supported my viewpoints on something couldn't do it. But, I mean, obviously we're talking about something different here, but
There's definitely a pattern, guys, that's going on here. I mean, as elected officials, we're gonna have different citizens that may or may not agree with some of our stuff. And we've got to have thick skin. I can reassure you, at least for me personally, and I would hope nobody else on the board, I'll bring up a little bit of the past. We'll do what you did to a citizen whenever you made comments about Mr. Schaefer one day. You know, it's just out of respect. He is a registered voter. And, you know, you and I had a little disagreement on that also. But I just see a pattern.
Alderman Arnold, I'd like to ask just a couple questions just for clarity, because I'm not 100% clear on a couple of items. So just to set out the timeline so I understand, there was a decision made on the Jackson County Election Board suit. That decision was made, that decision was given to us as a board at some point by our attorney in his firm. The call that you made, was it in between when the decision was made and we found out officially, I guess, through the proper channels of Mr. Lauber's firm? You recall if it was between when the decision was made and when we were notified?
I don't know when for sure. I'd have to look at some notes or whatever, but the case findings came out on CaseNet. I made a couple of calls to City Hall, to the city manager and assistant city manager, left a message. I got a message back from Mr. Murphy that they'd be sending out some information. And it may have been, the information may have been out before I called, but I hadn't read it at that point. I'll be clear on that. But
Okay, when you made that call, and just asking, were you aware that, I mean, there's a possible avenue for the city to appeal?
no, my understanding it was a done and finished case at that point. And I talked with, I'll just go ahead and say my lawyer told me that I wasn't listed as a litigant on this particular case. None of us were. So I could have had that conversation with the election board even before it was finalized. And it wouldn't have violated anything as far as attorney-client, whatever. The clients can talk to one another outside their lawyers. A lot of times it occurs and they finalize things. Attorneys don't like you to do that because it interferes with what they're doing possibly. But you know, many things have been settled by that. But that was not my intent to try and call and settle anything down there. I was just doing a fact finding of some of the information I read on CaseNet from what was the other side of the issues.
Was there any specific reason whenever you called that you did identify yourself as an alderman, and not just citizen?
I just felt like it was to be honest, that, you know, and who I was, and that I wasn't trying to sneak in and get them to say something to me, because I wanted to do everything on an honest enough board. My whole intention, the whole process was to not do anything under the table on the process, and I thought I was doing everything proper when the phone call took place at that time.
So, and just to help me understand a little bit more, so when you did make that phone call, was there any specific information that you might have been after or trying to understand better? Or I'm just, as of right now, I'm failing to understand the purpose of the phone call, I guess.
In some of the litigation, it talked about prior contact from Jackson County Election Board to the city. I hadn't heard of any prior contact from them, so I called to clarify that, and that's not the only thing I really ask about, is that, you know, had they contacted the city prior to our request for the modifications to the voter rolls.
Okay, understood. I guess and where I kind of branch off and begin to disagree with you is the statement that you made earlier, where you say you want to act in the best interest of the citizens that elected you. I totally understand that, and I totally agree. Although I don't know that contacting the Jackson County Election Board before, and I understand you called and some city officials, city staff, and left a message. I don't know that calling the Jackson County Election Board without speaking to city staff first was necessarily in the best interest of the citizens that elected you. I know maybe there's a lag time in there, and unfortunately that is just, you know, how things work. And it might have been a day, might have been half a day, might have been a couple of days before you got a call back from Ken or from, you know, Mr. Lauber's office. I just think I don't believe, I don't agree that that was in the best interest of the citizens that elected you. Just my opinion.
Mayor, I've had an opportunity to look at some of the records here. I did confirm that that the judge signed the order on February 14th, so Valentine's Day. We did, I received an email about it at 4:41 PM on the 14th. I called Mr. Murphy on my way to another city meeting that night to let him know. And then, or was that a Friday? I'm trying to remember. No, it was a Tuesday, so I was on my way to another meeting. And then we sent an email to the city administrator and the assistant city administrator on, I believe, on the 15th. Had it here, but yes. So I don't know how that was then relayed to the board, but we did send our email to Ken and Teresa at 1:15 on the 15th.
I think you just forwarded that to us, didn't you? Sometime.
Yeah,
sometime
that day or the next, yeah.
Anyone have any other discussion or questions?
It was forwarded to us on the 16th at 11:15 in the morning.
Well, I
But
think
you still made the call prior to that time, correct?
I couldn't tell you for sure what time. I know I called, but this may have come out before I made the call.
I sure wish your attorney would be here so he could answer it a little more clearly.
I think the thing that still bothers me is you discussed confidential information, whether you thought it was right, wrong, or indifferent to do so. You know that what's discussed in closed session executive meetings is not discussed, period. You don't go out and discuss it with anybody. You know, it's, I don't want to say sacred, but it's confidential for a reason, and you don't discuss it, period. You just don't.
So the thing I really want to key in on for me personally during this discussion is the conversation with Chuck or whoever else you had this conversation with about the vote. Can you just give us more information? I'm just trying to understand exactly this discussion that took place. You said it happened on a couple of different occasions, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
Well, I don't know if we had a conversation about this particular vote on a couple of conversations. We probably had a conversation on it. My recollection is probably what I referred to as I wasn't in favor of it, which Chuck maybe took that as what my vote was. And it more than likely would have been after the March 6th date that if we had that when we had that conversation that Mr. Lauber has said that this would all be open to the deal because of finalization of the case.
Why would you even discuss it with him? Why would you even bring the situation up to somebody?
Because it affected him.
What's more important, though, the city or Chuck?
The city.
And who took the vote that you were talking about that you weren't in favor for? Who took that vote?
The Aldermen.
It was the board's vote, right? And I think you and I have had a discussion where I made it very clear that I think that once the board's made a vote, even if we're on the losing end, I've been on the losing end of votes before, that we have to move forward as that was the board's vote. And we have to go forward as the board as a whole. Before a vote, I think that we all have the opportunity to agree and disagree and, plead our case. But once a decision has been made, the board made the decision to move the city one direction or the other, and we have to be a one to do that, even if we disagree politically or on a certain decision. This was the conversation I had with you about you calling the county. And now we're having another discussion within 2 weeks of you disagreeing with another vote that the board took. Even if you say you didn't disclose that vote, you're still saying that you were out there telling people that you were not in favor of a vote that the board took. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what you're saying.
I mean, you said, you used the word not in favor, right?
Yes.
And you told Chuck that you weren't in favor of the vote that the board took.
Yeah, you could say that.
So, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong here. So I probably am. I basically have, there's 4 options for the board.
Would you like me to go over those?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, one is, of course, not really not, is do nothing. I mean, you can do nothing. Then you have verbal or written censure, correct? I don't know how verbal work, but written would be, board would have to direct staff to via resolution, I'm assuming.
Correct, Mayor. So if the board's decision this evening were to do nothing, you could vote on that tonight and proceed with doing nothing. If you wanted to do an informal verbal censure based on the discussion that you've had here this evening, you could certainly do that and vote on that this evening based on this discussion. If you wanted to do something that I will qualify as or classify as mid-formal, where you would wanted some sort of a written censure, that is not something that we have available for you this evening. So we would take your direction as staff to put together a censure document that you would then review at your next meeting and decide whether to approve it.
Okay. And then the final option is impeachment trial, is that?
Correct. So the highest level, the most formal discipline in this circumstance would be to request an impeachment hearing. When you do that, elected officials have property right in retaining their term, and we're protecting the voters' intent to have them serve that term. So in order to extinguish a term earlier than the time that is set for the term, you actually have to go through it's a full hearing. It's treated as a contested case hearing. There will be a court reporter. Our firm would serve as a prosecutor. We would recommend that you would hire an outside counsel to serve as what we would call a magistrate. It would be someone who would sit and advise the mayor, because the mayor would essentially sit as a chief judge. The rest of the board members would sit as a judge. Mr. Arnold, if he were going through that, he could have his counsel present, would have a right to present his side of the case and be defended in that matter. I will tell you that unfortunately, our firm has done close to half a dozen of these in the last 2 years. They are politically difficult. They're very expensive, but it's an option.
With that, I mean, you can subpoena witnesses, correct? Or not? I mean,
You can.
but they're not, it's not like a court where they're required to show up though,
Yeah,
right?
you have the ability to do that. Most of the time, witnesses will comply and come, but yes, you can subpoena them.
But we can't force them to testify.
Not prepared to answer that question. I have not luckily had to do that in the half dozen or so that we've dealt with recently.
Okay, so I guess if there's no more discussion or questions, looking for.
All I can say is that, there was no intent for me to do harm to this board or the city. And at this point, I have to throw myself on the mercy of you all and your interpretation of it, and with the understanding that I did not have any malice in mind when the phone call was made.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually more concerned about the conversation with Chuck at this point. I mean, in conjunction with the county election board. I think that those two run in a disagreement with the board, and it's led to this on two different occasions now, where you went to the county board, and then obviously there's been a conversation with Chuck. I mean, and your viewpoints were expressed.
Do we have a direction, or would it be whatever be a motion? Correct? So I mean,
Yes, Mayor, you could entertain a
At the-
motion, and if an
to any
alderman
of the four
wishes
options.
to make a motion to take one of the four actions, and then it would need to be seconded and voted upon.
I'll put a motion forward for a written censor.
A motion of Alderman Skinner for a written censure. I have a second.
Second.
Alderman Knox. Any discussion?
Mayor, if I could, just so that the board understands then what they would be asking for. In this circumstance, a written for a motion a motion for a written censure would essentially be direction to city staff to create a document. And this board may recall that just less than a year ago, you did a written censure previously of the prior mayor. It would be a similar situation where we would draft up a document that would lay out recitals, lay out the facts as we heard them this evening from the discussion that board members said were important. We would list those out, and then we would bring that document back for the board to review. If you have edits, we could certainly make those. If you don't have edits, then you could go ahead and consider that vote on whether you would like to adopt that document.
Any discussion or questions?
As much as it concerns me and disappoints me, Dale, that you took something out of executive session and spoke with it in the public, out in the open, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt of my feelings that it doesn't call for impeachment. But I wanna make sure that you understand that what's discussed behind that door stays behind that door. So that's just where my standing is on it right now.
Additional discussion or questions? Okay, then we'll take a vote on, all in favor of directing staff to come up with the document, be via resolution at our next meeting. All right. Okay, all in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
Do we do a roll call, or are we good? That'd be a roll call?
It's not a roll call. You may want to poll the votes
Okay.
just so that we are clear.
Alderman Cleaver,
Yes.
Alderman Knox,
Yes.
Alderman Skinner,
Yes.
Alderman Bass.
Yes.
Alderman Mills,
Yes.
Alderman Arnold.
No.
All right. Next up is presentations. We have a presentation and survey results from Confluence. Marshall Allen is going to present to us this evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Aldermen, city staff. My name is Marshall Allen. I work for Confluence. I'm part of the planning consultant team working on the update to the Green Valley Comprehensive Plan and Parks Master Plan update. Confluence, along with Trans Systems and ETC Institute, are working on the planning process and have been involved with it for several months, as many of you know. So tonight, my purpose here is just to give a high-level overview of the survey that was administered by ETC Institute, and just to kind of give you, again, a summary of what that document is saying and how we'll use it in the comprehensive planning process. You'll see in your packet tonight just those two logos. That's just for your information. Those are the logos that were developed as part of this planning process. The one with the blue shades is for the green shades is for the Parks Master Plan. So you might see those on city posts or advertisements. So just something For the survey itself, it was administered during the first few months of this year, 2023. It involved packets being mailed out to random samples of households throughout the city. ETC then did some follow-up correspondence with those homeowners and reached out to those to encourage participation. And the goal was to collect at least 400 survey responses, and the survey did complete 432 responses. Huge expectations. Great thing. The questions in the survey focused primarily on improvements to transportation facilities and infrastructure, improvements to parks and recreation facilities and amenities, overall quality of life, and asked residents to think about prioritizing of investments for the city related to those items. On the next slide, we'll see the first question that we'll go over tonight, just the importance of investing in transportation systems. So you see the top three answers there: roadway upgrades with 93%, traffic flow at intersections 88%, and then sidewalk connectivity and improvement 82%. And I should say that those percentages represent responses that were either very supportive or supportive of those items. And those three things you'll kind of hear over and over again, especially sidewalk connectivity and improvements. That's something that runs through the gamut of the survey results, is the desire for the community to become even more walkable than it currently is today. On the next slide, again, importance of transportation systems. Part of the results that we got also included a series of these maps. The city was divided into different sections, and you just see here as an example related to sidewalk connectivity and improvements, the areas of the city that were very supportive towards that particular improvement versus just supportive. So you see the northernmost areas of the city and the southernmost areas of the city generally were very supportive of sidewalk connectivity improvements than the middle section of the city, but supportive all the way across. The next slide talks about bicycle use and other modes of transportation other than vehicular use. I think it's probably no surprise that most residents of Grand Valley do get around by their personal automobile. So you see 77% utilize their vehicle several times a day. And then you see other modes of transportation, walking, bicycling, and public transit drops off considerably after that point. There was a question about how important is it for the city to invest in those other modes of transportation, so the walking, biking, public transportation. And you do see that, about 45% did say it was either very important, with about 33% saying neutral. Just given how the responses were on question 4 and other questions in this survey, I think that response was heavily indicated by the fact that people want to be walking more in this community, and a little less so with bicycle or public transportation. On the next slide, level of support for actions to improve amenities in the community. So the top three answers were to improve existing parks and recreation facilities, and those could be through things like new buildings, improved paving, trees, playgrounds, and renovations. Second to that was improving maintenance at existing parks and recreation facilities. Those two top answers say, Grand Valley has a good stock of these amenities in the community already. Let's enhance and invest in what we already have. Following that, 74% saying improving the access to those facilities and those amenities is important. So again, thinking about walkability and the connection within the city itself. And then looking further down, acquiring land for parks and amenities. So as the city grows, realizing that could be something needed in the future, and then adding and enhancing programs in those facilities as well. The next slide looks at top priorities for investments for facilities and amenities. So this is something called the priority investment rating. This is something that ETC does, and it reflects the importance residents place on the items. So the sum of their top 4 choices mixed with the unmet needs, so needs that are only met partly or not at all. And so based on that, you see the top 3 priorities there would be an indoor aquatic center, nature trails, and then walking and hiking trails of about a half mile to 2 miles, with longer hiking trails of 2+ miles and off-leash dog parks coming in at number 4 and number 5. Similarly, they asked about different programs. So adult fitness and wellness programs, general community events, and older adult fitness programs were those top 3 responses. So this indicates that, generally residents feel like there's a good amount of programming and activities maybe for the younger populations of Green Valley, but more is needed for the older adult populations of Green Valley. Level of support for actions in neighborhoods is on the next slide. So again, you see there with 90% very supportive of ensuring that streets and sidewalks are designed to ensure safe use for all people of all ages. Again, speaks to that walkability idea. Somewhat surprisingly, the next 2 items had to do with stormwater management and flood resistance measures taking place in neighborhoods. And then the highlighted items, the last 3 bullets, had to do with housing. So generally, there's high support for senior living and aging in place developments within Green Valley, and a little less support when talking about allowing different housing types within the same neighborhood or developing housing options for a range of income levels within, again, the same development or neighborhood. I think we've learned in the planning process so far that there is a need, understanding for increased housing typologies, different types of homes in Green Valley. This is just kind of speaking to diversity within a single development or even building. Talking about healthier living, which 3 items listed below would make residents feel healthier living in their neighborhood? So we see, again, safer, more walkable streets, reduction in litter, trash, and post-flooding debris, and then more inviting parks and recreation centers. And then the last question I'll go over is just a really good positive one. The survey asks, do you think you will be living in Green Valley 5 years from now? And 90% of the respondents said yes, so that's a very good indication that people are very happy with where they're living. And then approximately how many years have you lived in Green Valley? You see that a very small percentage, 6%, is 31 or more years, so that's indicating that a good majority of the people that took this survey are relatively new residents of Green Valley, so they chose to move here, and 90% of them feel like they'll be living here. So those are very good indicators of the city. So real quick, the overall takeaways: there's general concern for over traffic congestion and roadway capacity. There is support for improving the existing parks and recreational facilities and the amenities within Green Valley. But there is a desire and a need for more walking and hiking trails, so to connect what is already existing here today. There is that desire for an indoor aquatic facility to consider in the future, more programs and community events targeted towards those older populations. While bicycle infrastructure wasn't ranked as one of the highest priorities, a question did ask, how should bicycle infrastructure be used? And the feeling was that it should be used to connect schools, parks, and recreation facilities, and to help bridge that north and south divide currently experienced because of the interstate. Residents do want safer or more walkable streets. And then again, housing diversity is not a real high priority for the community, but again, that term diversity means within the same neighborhood or building, not necessarily for the types of housing available throughout the community. And then just finally, the next steps in our comprehensive planning process, we will have an input review meeting with the plan steering committee on April 5th. So we have an interactive engagement website up right now. We'll present all the information that we've received to date to them at that time, which will then lead us right into phase 3, which is where we'll begin drafting the plan itself. We'll have several touch points with the committee, the elected officials, and the public itself to review those draft chapters, and then we'll go through the final plan and adoption process later this year. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Yes. So when you say residents want safer or more walkable, I'm assuming when they mean safer that they're concerned with traffic being hit or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's traffic, amount of traffic, and then also the proximity to traffic. The sidewalks are right on the curb line.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as comfortable, or there's the perception that it's less safe.
So that's kind of feedback, or you had some writing in there that said that?
I'm inferring that from what we've received from the public input process
Yeah.
so far.
I mean, it could be related to lack of sidewalks in
Could
parts
be
of
that
town
as
too.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
It could also be like crosswalks,
yeah.
stop signage at intersections, stuff like that.
Yep, all the
You have anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is public hearing for a JCD LLC requesting an amendment to the city's comprehensive future land use map, a change of zoning from District R1 Single Family Residential to District R1P Single Family Residential Planned Overlay District, and from R1 Single Family Residential to M1P Light Industrial Planned Overlay District.
So, Mr. Mayor and Board, I will provide the staff information. I do want to clarify that these were advertised as two separate public hearings. So the first public hearing was in regards to the amendment to the land use map for the comprehensive plan. The second is in regards to the rezoning application. But I'll do both staff reports in this presentation. I do also want to point out that the applicant's representative, Stephen Warger, is here. He is representing the property owner, which is JAC'(D) LLC. That company is owned by a representative who also owns a company known as Icon. They're a grading and construction company that specializes in excavation and land clearing services. That business is located in Grain Valley on Harris Street. Also is Tandem Paving. It's owned by David Smith and located in Blue Springs. Icon and Tandem Paving have discussed relocating their businesses to this location if the request and the rezoning and development plan are approved. So in regards to the comprehensive plan map amendment, the last time the comprehensive plan was updated was in August of 2014. However, as you know from various ordinance changes, that land use map has been amended by property owners and applicants in the past. The city's comprehensive plan contains that preferred land use plan. The land use plan presents a vision of how the community will grow in the future and where the future land uses will be located. There is a copy of that preferred land use plan in your packet that was provided. The plan illustrates land use types such as single-family, multifamily, commercial retail, mixed use, and business park. The overall area that we are looking at this evening is north of Creekside Village, approximately 16 acres in size. The proposed map amendment, it consists of 12 acres, which would be the northern part of that 16 acres. And there's actually an exhibit in your packet marked as future land use map that distinguishes that 12 acres as far as a change in the preferred land use. Currently, the preferred land use plan illustrates that 12 acres as single family. The application is to amend the future land use map and change that to business park. Business park typically represents land uses such as light industrial type uses. The city's zoning regulations includes a section that addresses the process and review criteria to amend the comprehensive plan. In that staff report that's before you, there are 4 items that are identified in the zoning ordinance. I'll take each of those items and just comment on them in regards from a staff perspective. The first one is whether events after the comprehensive plan adoption have changed the character and or condition of the area to make the application acceptable. Since the adoption of the comprehensive plan, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has studied this area and issued new FEMA maps in 2017. In the general area of the proposed map amendment, there is an area designated as floodway, which discourages any development within its boundaries. Another area shown is the 100-year flood area or floodway fringe, which permits development as long as the lowest basement floor elevation is 1 foot above the determined base flood elevation. Local governments frown on single-family development occurring in this area, but are encouraged when private investment in retail, office, industrial buildings are proposed. The second item is rather the change is consistent with the goals and policy of the plan. The goals and policy of the types of businesses in the business park are to create jobs and provide an additional base of property and sales tax revenue. The proposed map amendment to business park promotes these goals and policies more than the single-family residential that's currently on the preferred land use map in the comprehensive plan. The third item is whether the public services and utilities are adequate to serve the proposed land use in the map amendment. The property owner's development plan illustrates a private asphalt driveway to serve the 4 commercial buildings. The property owner will also install sanitary sewer and water extensions to serve the property and adjoining proposed lots. The property owner will also construct the necessary stormwater management facilities, gas communication, and electrical service extensions required to serve the site. The fourth item is the impacts of the potential costs and benefits derived by the community or area by the proposed change. This site has not been developed since the original Creekside Village was platted and constructed in 2007. The benefits outweigh the costs for the city since there will be revenue from property taxes and job creation, whereas the new infrastructure will be installed by the developer and there shall be very little maintenance for the city for several years to come. Other city services to be provided are just snow removal, but that would be snow removal within the adjacent Sweeney Road and police protection. Public notice was given in the Examiner in regards to both of the public hearings. In regards to the master plan land use map amendment, Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on February 8th, 2023. The commission voted unanimously to recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen. Staff recommends approval to amend the preferred land use map in the city's comprehensive plan as well. In regards to the proposed change in zoning, there's an exhibit in your packet that shows change in zoning from District R1 to District R1P, which is Single Family Residential District Planned Overlay District, and then the change in zoning on approximately the 12 acres that we just discussed from District R1 Single Family Residential District to District M1P Light Industrial Planned Overlay District. And this also would involve then the approval of a preliminary development plan for Creekside Village 4th plat. So referring to the staff report, to give you a little background, we talked briefly about Creekside Village to the south, which was platted in 2007 and zoned R1P Single Family Residential District Plan Overlay District. The average dimension of the single-family lots within that Creekside Village plat are 32 feet wide and 76 feet deep, or 2,432 square feet. The plat also included private alleys so that the lots could access rear entry garages. The private alleys are the responsibility of the Creekside Homeowners Association. Creekside Village third plat was recorded on October 12, 2022. This plat covered the 16 acres that I was referencing to earlier. This created 3 lots and a tract A. The area of the third plat encompasses the proposed Creekside Village fourth plat that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. That plat will contain the proposed 51 single-family lots in the R1P area, and then the light industrial lot will contain the 4 buildings that will be zoned M1P Light Industrial Planned Overlay District. Once the Creekside Village fourth plat is recorded, then Creekside Village third plat will be vacated. The applicant has filed the application as a planned overlay district. The purpose of the planned overlay district is to provide some flexibility and latitude in location of buildings, structures, open space, parking, roads, drives, and variations in the setback and yard requirements. In reviewing the proposed preliminary development plan under the R1P single-family residential, as I mentioned before, there would be 51 single-family lots. The dimension of these lots are 32 feet wide and 80 feet deep and contain 2,560 square feet. In District R1, the minimum lot width is 65 feet, the minimum lot depth is 100 feet, and the minimum lot area is 7,000 square feet. I'll only provide that information to show you the flexibility and variation that the applicant is requesting. But as I had mentioned before in the previous Creekside Village, these lots are very similar to what's already platted out there now. The applicant is requesting the variations in those setbacks. So in the District R1P, their front yard setback requirement is 25 feet, the rear yard setback is 30 feet, and the side yard setback is 8 feet. The applicant is requesting that the front and rear yard setbacks be 20 feet and the side yard setbacks be 3 feet. The single-family houses will be 1,350 square feet, more or less, which exceeds our minimum requirement in District R1, which is 1,100 square foot. The development proposals the extension of Northeast Wolf Creek Road and Northeast Deer Creek Road to city standards. The residential area will be developed in phases with approximately 32 units in Phase 1 and 19 units in Phase 2. This proposed District R1P does not contain any alleys, as the previous Creekside Village does. There is a noted private pocket park that will be maintained by the new homeowners association of this proposed Creekside Village fourth plat, and will include amenities such as gazebos or benches. The M1 Light Industrial Planned Overlay District, I provided an aerial map that kind of showed you that proposed 16 acres. The site has a floodplain and floodway designation. The applicant proposes to make an application for a Clomar F. This is a conditional use letter of map revision for fill to remove the floodplain designation by placing fill on the site per FEMA regulations. The area will be filled outside the floodway to an elevation of 1 foot above the base floodplain elevation. There is a large existing pond that's shown on that aerial photo. It's the water area that's to the left. And this is a borrow area that was for a neighboring development fill. This is the pond that they propose to fill and eliminate and fill 1 foot above that base flood elevation. The existing detention, that's the land water area on the right-hand side of those two water areas closer to Sweeney Road. That is designed for the entire development, including the Creekside Village to the south, and will be maintained in place. There are wetlands designated on the site. They'll be preserved or mitigated per Corps of Engineer requirements. The development will consist of 4 buildings within that M1P. Each building will be 11,200 square feet. The asphalt drive will provide access to the building from Seymour Road. There will be no access to those proposed buildings from the internal residential streets. The ordinance requires that on a planned development be permanently screened from adjoining properties zoned for residential use. The development plan shows that there will be a 6-foot tall solid fence installed, and then also ornamental screening of landscaping as shown on the development plan. The change in zoning to District R1P and proposed development plan for single-family residential development would be compatible and very similar to the development of Creekside Village to the south. The change of zoning to M1P and proposed development plan would be appropriate given this site is in the designated floodplain and significant investment is needed to develop the property. The investment will yield a benefit to the city in property taxes and jobs instead of vacant ground. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning request and preliminary development plan for Creekside Village. Fourth plat, the Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on February 8th regarding this request, and the commission unanimously recommended approval to the Board of Aldermen. Thank you for your patience. And the applicant and
Might have been the longest one
representatives
yet,
are-
Mark. I don't know.
and the applicant and their representatives here if there's any questions.
Okay. Board have any questions?
I think you said that there's not gonna be any, like, truck traffic through the neighborhood, through the residential neighborhood. It's all, for the commercial property.
That is correct. There-
So gonna be okay.
Well,
The
will there be
asphalt
quite a
drive-
bit of truck traffic? I mean, is that where you're gonna, I guess the paving company goes back there? Is that where you'll keep the trucks and stuff? Okay. What about, I mean, are we expecting any noise issues with the M1, right? I mean, I know it falls under that, I mean, what is the decibel level that falls with that zoning right now? Is there a specific level?
I don't think there's a specific level as far as defined by the ordinance. It's really a matter if it becomes a nuisance. I mean, I could let the applicant address it, but
Yeah,
they're basically, go ahead if you want to address it.
I guess what I'm looking for is what exactly, so I know you're not, I guess it's basically for storage and equipment. I don't think they'll be doing much actual work back there per se, right?
Correct.
This storage.
Correct. My name's Steve Werger, Werger Associates, 6127 Northwest Pine Ridge Circle, Parkville, Missouri. And you are correct. It's basically office, warehouse, and storage of the equipment. You got an excavating company and a paving company, and they don't do much of that in their own office area. It's all the machinery's out unless it's coming back for repairs or just being stored while they're waiting for the next jobs.
And there will be a 6-foot fence, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I had. This is one about traffic and what was all going to be located. So, I mean, of the 4 buildings, those 2 businesses will take up there won't be anything else really there other than that?
We'll probably take 2 of them. There's potentially other, or maybe more, or maybe there won't be another 2. But,
Okay.
we want to have that flexibility.
Might not be able to answer this, but as for the actual houses themselves, they're looking at being owner occupied, or they're going to want those as rentals?
Intent to be owner occupied.
Okay.
For sale.
Are they gonna match the style of the houses that are already there?
In as much as that width and probably depth, but we'll have front entry. It's because we're gonna use front entry off the streets and not use an alley to do that, so that will be a difference. As it is right now, there are some alleys that are kind of half-built and half would be on us. We have talked to the president, I have, of the HOA, to where we will dedicate that extra footage so they can have their full-width alleys and do that, be able to have their access the way they were designed. We're gonna come in off the front.
So will this be an extension of the existing neighborhood then? Like, will
won't
it
be
fall
the
into
same-
that HOA?
Pardon?
Will it fall into that HOA
No,
that's
sir.
existing?
It'll be a separate HOA, but again, we've been in talks of how to communicate and how to get along with each other as far as. That's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Because really and truthfully, our HOA would be a part maintenance of the detention, since we do share that, and the pocket park. And other than that, we really don't have anything that would be in, other than architecture and that type of stuff, but as far as maintenance.
You'd have to drive through that neighborhood to get to your neighborhood.
Yes, part of it, but there is access off of Seymour too.
Is that Wolf Creek?
Yes.
And these the lots aren't in a flood zone?
The houses are not done. And like they said, we've already made application to FEMA for the wetland determinations and any mitigation there. We hope to have an answer, I was hoping to have an answer by this week, but it'll probably be next week. And there is application for what he talked about, the conditional letter of map revision based on fill, and which would move that flood zone, floodplain away. It would eliminate the majority of that and go back towards the floodway, so there wouldn't be any concerns with floodplain in that area. But the houses are not in it, the industrial is, and we're proceeding on to get approval to eliminate that.
Do you foresee like all that fill and everything happening before the houses are being constructed, or will houses be up first?
It will be potentially combination, or will be a combination.
The reason I ask is because, lo and behold, if we get houses up first, people buy those houses and they're gonna be like, "What's going on over there?" And then I don't want people being surprised by what
Obviously,
be close.
we'll have a plan and we'll tell them what's going on, but we want to get that big pond filled.
Yeah, I
And
get it.
so we'll bring material in as soon as.
I
we
just don't
can
want
there.
people like, "Oh, we got a big pond to look out on our house," and they don't have a big pond, and
And the only thing with the residential is the phase 1, which is basically the south and the westerly side of the residential, can be built if we build those 2 streets and extend the utilities without getting the total fill done, but I will probably will be having machinery moving and that
Okay.
type of stuff, trying to fill that pond before the house. is
Okay, that's all I want to.
completed. We're aware of that. We don't want
Yeah.
to surprise anybody. And it's not, the intent, I think, right now, I'm 99% sure that the developers are not going to do the houses, they will be selling them to another person.
The lot, the sell the lots, okay.
Okay, so a regular builder
Right.
to do that. So we'll have to disclose all
Okay,
that
good.
information.
Mark, question for you. So originally, this whole plot of land here was all zoned single family.
Correct.
And were the commercial buildings, it looks like there's 4 of them that are proposed to go in, that would have encompassed single family houses?
Yes.
That's a flood zone, right?
Correct.
So it was just an oversight years ago when that was zoned that way, or we just zoned it that way, and now we're like, oh, that's enough. Because just looking at it, it looks like a flood zone to me. I wouldn't want to build a house there.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess
don't know
I,
how much
it's-
your 2017 remapping changed that, and it could have been a little different view many years ago of what that was, but it probably was still a flood zone, yes, and they knew they were gonna have to do something, and it's more than likely why they're not there now.
Okay. Have we had any proposals from other developers to make this all single family?
the only item that we had prior to this was the plat that was filed by the previous property owner, which was that plat that I described to you, which was basically just 3 lots, all 3 large lots, and then the rest of it was to be a tract to designate the floodway area. So those 3 lots, the houses would have been in the area where the single family is, where it's outside the floodplain area, but the rest of the balance of the property would have been in the floodway area.
Sure.
So
Sorry.
that's the only other proposal, within, few years that has been done.
Okay.
Obviously, he wasn't even able to sell those lots, those 3 lots to anyone, probably based on the same concerns as you raised of being in the floodplain area.
And you don't see that concern
No, sir.
with this? And then you said 1,200 square foot? Is that what you're looking for?
Thereabouts, that ballpark.
Do you have an idea of cost for one of these houses?
Not at this point. We would like to, I say something, whatever, it's, we'd hopefully like to be in the mid-upper 2s, maybe if we're lucky.
Would you consider this like an entry-level house?
Yes, that would be even below the metro entry-level house number.
Okay. That's all.
I do enough of this, and those numbers are in the 400, it starts with a 4 most of the time.
I mean, that's probably, yeah, very accurate.
And we'll just have to see where we're at. Our goal is to try and make it more affordable or less expensive, however you want to look at, however you define that. I won't say we'll get there, but we're gonna try.
And you said no alleyways.
No,
Okay.
Additional questions? I see none. As this is a public hearing, I will open it up for comments for or against from the audience regarding both of the rezoning and the
Mr. Mayor,
we do this too.
sorry, yeah, we are gonna do it as
Okay.
two.
So we'll open up the first one first, then, which will be the future land use map change. Anyone want to speak for or against that? All right, so we'll close that public hearing. Now we'll open up the second one, which is for the rezoning from the R1 to the M1P. Anyone want to speak for or against that? All right, seeing none, we will close that public hearing as well. And we will move on to resolutions. First resolution is a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley, Missouri, authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Utility Service Company Incorporated to provide maintenance for city-owned water tanks and tower.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number R 23-25.
Okay, do I have a motion from Alderman Mills to approve resolution R 23-25. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Bass. Any discussion?
Mayor and members of the board, this is the company that we have used for a number of years, but essentially they're responsible for the two ground storage tanks and the water tower. So they're the ones that do all of the maintenance and have a yearly schedule for them. The importance of that, obviously, is we get checked every year to make sure that the water system is up to the proper standards. So in utilizing them, we have not had any issues and want to continue that relationship.
Have any questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Next up, we have Resolution R 23-26, a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Civic Review.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution R 23-26.
Okay, a motion from Alderman Skinner to approve resolution R 23-26. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Cleaver. Any discussion?
Mayor and members of the board, Civic Review is the platform that we use for online permitting and occupational license. Since we took that online, if you remember, one of our goals in the strategic plan was to try and give more options and be more technology centered, I guess, and focus on things that can help the public. And so we've been with this company for a year now, so this would be a renewal of that agreement.
Questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, next we have Resolution R 23-27, a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with Jackson County, Missouri for the distribution of combat funds of $85,867 for the 2023 fiscal year.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 23-7.
Yeah, motion from Alderman Arnold to approve Resolution R 23-27. I have a second.
Second.
Alderman Knox. Any discussion?
Mayor and members of the board, again, this is kind of our annual agreement to basically accept funds from combat, which those proceeds come from essentially the anti-drug sales tax. So this covers a lot of our DARE expenses with the schools.
Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Next, we have Resolution R 23-28, a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with the Grand Valley School District for school resource services.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number R 23-28.
Okay, I have a motion from Alderman Bass to approve Resolution R 23-28. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Skinner. Any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, this is our annual agreement with the school district that outlines the responsibilities and duties of the SROs and the financial responsibilities there. This has gone through the school board and the language was approved by that board.
Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, a couple questions. The first being, and tell me if I'm wrong here, was there a discussion last year about taser usage from our officers inside the schools? About the school not wanting our officers to carry tasers inside the schools?
I'm not familiar with it, but I don't. Chief, do you know?
I've been made aware of some of the discussion, but I think that's been resolved at the administrative level, so we're on the same page.
So your officers are able to carry all their normal
Yes.
weapons into the school? Okay. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, next up will be ordinances.
Yes, this is bill number B 2306, an ordinance approving a petition to establish the Creekside Village Community Improvement District, establishing the term of existence of the district, directing the city clerk to report the creation of the district to the Missouri Department of Economic Development and authorizing certain actions related thereto.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the second reading of Bill B 23-06 and bring it back as ordinance 2413.
I got a motion from Alderman Knox to approve Bill B 23-06 for its second reading, making it ordinance 2413. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Skinner. Any discussion?
Mayor and members of the board, if you remember, this is the second read of the ordinance to establish the CID. This was pushed back from a previous agenda to this agenda to allow the applicant to have a little bit more time.
Wasn't there a meeting set up regarding this
It's
also?
my understanding, I think there's a representative here for the applicant. It was my understanding that there was a meeting scheduled, that no one showed up for the meeting. I think Mr. Moore could probably give a little more detail on that, but that was my,
Okay. So we did attempt that meeting and no residents showed up?
Yes, we sent notices out to the resident owners, and nobody appeared other than two aldermen.
And I don't know, maybe this might be a question for Mark or a question for you, Ken, I'm not for sure, but if these alleys continue to deteriorate, does it fall back on the city at some point that, because I'm thinking, okay, when we have like grass or weeds or debris that needs to be remediated, we eventually have to go out, fix that as a city, and then we try to collect on what it cost us. If these alleys continue to fall apart, at some point, does it become our responsibility to either condemn the alleys or to fix them and then try to get reimbursed for them? And at some point, they're going to become a major safety issue if something's not done, right?
correct. Being a private alley, we've obviously never had to go through that, but I would assume it could be the same as, say, a parking lot or something like that if it's not up to code.
Mayor, one thing to keep in mind, and Mr. Murphy just hit upon it, at this point, these have not been dedicated to the city. They're not the city's responsibility to maintain like you would a dedicated street or sidewalk, okay? So with respect to that, it is private property. To the extent that if it were left in such disrepair that, for example, grass grew higher than what we allow by ordinance, we may be in a situation where we would have to go out and cut that grass. Like you do with other nuisance properties that allow that to occur during the growing season. With respect to if it became, too bumpy to be passable, or if cars were damaged by going down that's not a public street. That would be the private property owner's issue, and there would be some sort of a civil suit ultimately brought in order to
So it
recover any
doesn't fall upon
damages.
us any
It would
time
not.
that,
At most, you would be looking at potential nuisance enforcement.
any questions or discussion?
I think I've made myself pretty clear on my stance of this, and I'll just kind of quickly reiterate those. What I don't like about this is the setting a precedent to our other neighborhoods that have HOAs, that there's many of inside of our city, where we can't get something past the threshold needed in those HOAs. So we come in front of a 6-person board like this and have us make that decision for the HOA. I feel like this is a decision. I'll give the example of if my neighborhood wants to put a second pool in, and they need a vote for that pool, and they can't get enough people to show up. They can't get the threshold of the amount of neighbors that are needed to show up to an HOA meeting to get that vote done. What they can end up doing is just walking in here, ask for a CID, say we're improving our neighborhood, getting the second pool. We're gonna bring more people into the neighborhood because of that. We would vote for the CID. The city, the state would collect the money. They would be able to build the second pool. I think that's just a precedent that I don't want to set. Mr. Moore, and I appreciate it, you did send me an example of a neighborhood in Lee Summit. I think it's called Park Ridge. And not to put you on the spot here, but I did some looking into that CID, and I found an audit from 2017 that Nicole Galloway, our state auditor, had done. And randomly that CID actually popped up. And this is one of the things that I'm talking about when it comes to lack of oversight. So in 2017, that neighborhood paid $75,000 for landscaping, for lawn and landscaping. The company who received the funds from the CID that was collected from the state was the chairman of the board. There was no bidding that went out. It was one, there was, you know, it didn't go out for 3 bids like we would as a city or anything like that. It was, the chairman of the board decided that they were going with his company. I looked into it. I asked around some other HOAs on what they pay. It's not even close to 75,000. And that was one of the things that the state auditor mentioned was there's nothing that requires a CID to have any independent members on their board. So it could be, and I think the proposal here is it's the HOA who would be the board. I just, you know, again, lack of oversight. And then the biggest thing here, I think, is the lack of competitive procurement services. You don't have to go out and get your 3 bids like any other government entity would need to do. I think I've made my case here why I think that this should be something that's handled by the HOA through private funds. The city should have nothing to do with it.
Any other discussion?
I generally
Like,
agree
no one
with.
showed up to the meeting, to oppose it or before.
I was there. I have no idea.
Why did no one show up to oppose it or to, nobody cares either way? Is that right? If nobody shows up one way or another, the residents were all notified. So,
Yes, Bill Moore, attorney with Rouse Brett's White Cross. Excuse my voice, getting a little hoarse tonight. You're right. So we sent notices out to all the resident owners. Literally nobody showed up. And I can't tell you why they didn't show up, but.
well, I know you don't why, but bottom line is they don't care either way.
Right. And I can tell you that some of the resident owners did sign the petition that was presented to you for formation. So it's not like there's been total disinterest.
Yeah. You know what the percentage of that is? How many signed versus how many own?
I mean, the total numbers, but I guess the best way I can describe it for you is the statute requires more than 50% per capita owners. So that's each individual owner, and we exceeded the 50%. It also requires more than 50% of the assessed value, and that number was also exceeded. So it met the statutory requirements.
To move forward with the CID.
That's correct.
And how many units does the HOA president own?
I don't have that number right in front of me, but I'd say it's a dozen or more.
So a large percentage.
Right, which would, when you're doing the math, that obviously feels like we would add to the assessed value. We had way more than we needed for the assessed value, but we still had to have, even though that owner may have owned over a dozen, that only counts as 1 vote. So we still needed to have more than 50% of the per capita to sign. So multiple ownership doesn't help on the per capita.
Okay. And the HOA president would be the, he would be the one overseeing the funds in the CID.
The board, the HOA board would, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And if we continue, what does the city do then? Just let it deteriorate, nothing, or, I mean,
I guess the question, I know several years back when I think it was more owner occupied over there, I would get complaints about the condition of them. I haven't received that lately. Are we getting complaints about the condition of the alleyways to the city?
Well, I'm not, but it wouldn't come to me.
I think once it became very clear that the city had no responsibility regarding the alleys,
We
that it
stopped
was a
getting them.
responsibility of the homeowners, we did not receive
'Cause
complaints.
I guess I'm just
regarding
trying
the
to figure out, do they care to get them? I mean, I don't know. I mean, do they care to get them fixed if they're not showing up the meetings and?
well, yeah, they're not showing up for it and they're not showing up against it, so.
I think
And-
the answer yes, they do want those alleyways fixed. They do believe, as I said before in the previous meeting, they do believe by doing the CID, they're able to go out and borrow money, spread that out over a period of years, so the individual unit owners are not having to pay a large number up front. And that's the whole point of doing this. It would be sized to the amount that would be necessary to do the improvements in these alleyways, and then on an ongoing basis have a little bit that could be put aside for ongoing maintenance, so that you hopefully would never have to hear about this again.
So this would continue, if I understand you right, continue for next 20, 30 years? Is it a 5-year deal? I mean, you
Yeah,
get the money to fix them and then you don't end it? You lower it?
You would do the assessment, because it's just like you do your assessments, it's based on your needs for that upcoming fiscal year. So the assessment would be sized to whatever would be necessary if they borrowed money to do the improvements to pay off that annual amount of the debt, and then a little bit put aside to do some ongoing maintenance as necessary. It is set up, again, under the statute, you can't exceed more than 27 years. So it's set up for 27 years. If at some point after they get the alleyways improved and they have a fund set aside, or it could decide there's no more need to continue to have the CID in place and then terminate the CID, because there is the HOA there. So it's not going to be the intent of this CID is not to be a governing body, right? I mean, it's there to provide for a funding mechanism. That's why we have the overlap of the HOA board members being the CID board members, so that one body is making a single set of decisions. And so the intent here is just to get the funding, get the improvements made, and then move on.
Yeah, Mr. Moore, thank you for showing up tonight and answering our questions. I've got a couple more for you. Regarding the meeting, do you know off the top of your head how much advance notice was given to the residents?
It was more than a week.
Okay. Okay. And in regard, and just to help me understand and get a clear picture, in regard to the voting power through the HOA, I think you might have touched on this, but I just want to make sure I fully understand. An owner who might own more than one residential unit does not get more than one vote. Is that correct? The voting is structured in a manner where it is not per unit, it is per owner?
That's correct. There's a dual threshold. So an owner of multiple lots would have one vote on a per capita basis, but the total assessed value that is attributed to the multiple owners is counted. But in this case, because they're all about the same size, lots are about the same size, the only difference is that we still would have exceeded on the assessed value, even if you didn't accumulate that way, because we had more than 50% on the per capita. So we would have exceeded the threshold no matter what. It's just that with multiple ownerships, then that threshold was just greater.
Understood. In regard to ownership of those units over there, and I think you might have touched on this last time, and I apologize if you didn't. I'm going to ask the same question again. How many units are included in that HOA?
I believe the number is 63.
Okay. Do you know off the top of your head how many of those units are owned by, we'll call them non-local investors or owners?
I would have to go back and look at the signature pages. You have those pages in front of you. I just don't have it. I could count them up for you, but I'm trying to recall off the top of my head. I think maybe because one owner had the multiple, it's probably more than 50% are owned by someone not living in the subdivision, but
Sure. Okay.
I'm not positive.
Given the majority of those units then are owned by, we'll call individuals that do not occupy them, whether they are local or they are out of state. Was there a Zoom link or any sort of thing made available for this HOA meeting?
No.
Okay, it concerns me that there's an HOA meeting concerning this item here and no owners showed up in support of that. I mean, it's alarming to me. But, you know, and I guess generally, I generally agree with the concerns that Alderman Skinner has. I don't think, from a high level, I don't think I don't think that private matters should be involved with city government unless it's an extenuating circumstance. And the example that Alderman Skinner brought up, I just think that there are too loose of boundaries, in my opinion. There's not hard boundaries, and there's a loose boundaries there. And in my opinion, I think one of the things that Alderman Skinner referred to earlier, that there's not the bidding process that goes out. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's.
So whenever you mention that the amount that would be requested would be to perform the required work, the concern that I have there is who determines the cost of the required work. We could get into a situation where the required work is triple what the actual bid process would reveal. That's my concern.
Not sure I follow that.
Well, if you get a board member that says, I own a company, and I'm just using this as a hypothetical situation based on the one that Alderman Skinner presented, but if you get a board member that says, well, I've got a company that's going to come in and perform this work, and it's going to cost $100,000 to perform this work. Well, if we would have gone through the proper bid process, who's to say that actual cost would not have fleshed out to be $30,000? That's the concern, I guess, that I generally have. And would there be a bidding process that would go out?
I have advised the board, yes, to undergo a bidding process, simply because we represent a lot of these types of districts, and our advice is always to go out for bids. I know that the HOA, I think it was last summer, had gotten some quotes. They got 2 or 3 quotes, and they were actually ready to go forward. And the chairman asked me if my advice about whether or not they had to go ahead and go, and I said, well, you don't have the CID in place yet, so I wouldn't advise it. But they did go out and get some bids. I mean, keep in mind that, you know, and Alderman Skinner, I understand what you're saying about the other development, but keep in mind we don't have anybody like that in this situation. These owners are not going to want to pay more than they have to pay in order to get the work done. They're just like you. You know, they're just like me. They're going to go out and try to get the work done for the best price because they're having to pay for it. It's not like somebody else is paying for it. They're paying for it, all of those property owners. And so they are absolutely going to want to get the very lowest price that they can get to get the work done.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does have any questions or discussion?
The only concern I have with it is that there's 2 thresholds of payment on this, depending on which way you go. With the CID, there'll be an assessment that goes on their taxes, and somebody will be expected to pay that along with their taxes. They can't pay their taxes a certain number of years, then their house would be taken from them for that non-payment. under a homeowners association, there would be a situation where they couldn't pay it, they'd put a lien against the property. The lien would not be just satisfied till the day the property sold, which might be the only time the owner occupant has the opportunity to have the funds to even pay for the deal because they are on a limited income. These are starter homes and retirement homes, so we're talking about people with less means living in them. So under the CID, there's feasibly an opportunity that somebody could be pushed out of their home because they couldn't pay the assessed additional taxes on their home. So that's another concern there.
Anything else? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, be a roll call?
Excuse me, Alderman Bass,
No.
Alderman Cleaver,
Yes.
Alderman Mills,
Yes.
Alderman Knox,
No.
Alderman Skinner,
No.
Alderman Arnold.
No.
2-4.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, this is the first and second read of B 23-08, an ordinance of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Green Valley, Missouri, adopting Chapter 650 of the Municipal Code to add a new section 650-.020 regarding the rates of gross receipts taxes for all applicable utilities operating in the city.
Mayor, I move that we accept Bill B 23-08 for its first read and bring it back for its second read under emergency.
Okay, I have a motion from Alderman Arnold to approve Bill B 23-08 for its first reading, bringing it back tonight for its second reading by title only. Is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Skinner. Any discussion?
Mayor and members of the board, essentially what we have here is one of the utilities, Spire, has gotten approval for a greater than 7% increase to their rates because of basically a previous statute that was passed. The city has to go in afterwards and pass an ordinance that says that their rate will be the same, or essentially it would roll back. So we wouldn't be getting the same 5% that we're getting now. The reason it's on here for 2 reads is because although they were supposed to notify everyone, we found out from another city, and you only had a 30-day window after that went into effect to get it passed. So that's why it's on here for 2 reads. But essentially this ordinance makes it to where we'll be getting the same amount or same percentage that we get right now. So if it doesn't pass, then that gets rolled back. And we would not be getting that same percentage from the utilities. And that threshold is over 7. If it's anything over 7, that's what prompted the need for that change.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add too, and we credit Mr. Craig with finding this information. Our firm represents more than 70 cities as city attorney. Not all of them were on the list, but when we contacted our clients about this, everyone was in the same boat as Green Valley. Nobody saw the notice. I did some research into what the Public Service Commission, how they're supposed to notice. The statute isn't clear, and the Code of State Regulations isn't clear. It just says shall notify, and they say that the Spire in this case, what was required of them was that they were supposed to submit a list of cities and addresses. I'm looking on this list. It says City of Green Valley, 711 Main Street, and to the city collector. And I don't believe you still have not found the notice anywhere, correct?
Correct.
And that is true of at least half a dozen other of our cities. So we apologize that you're in a position where you would have to do a first and second read on the same evening. But there is a statutory deadline based on the timing that when the Public Service Commission granted the more than 7% increase for Spire's rates, I think it was it'd be a 90-day window, and so that expires on the 19th, and so that's why we're bringing this to you this evening. And in fact, we're doing this kind of all over. I've got a special meeting on next Thursday night because this coming Thursday night with one of my clients because they weren't supposed to meet before the deadline. So we're not sure why none of these cities seem to gotten the notice, but that's, part of where we're at with that.
Any questions, discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Alderman Cleaver?
No,
Yes.
no,
Oh,
we
sorry.
gotta go.
Next one.
You have to go for the second read
We
now.
have to,
Oh,
we have to.
My apologies, thank you. Okay, so this is the second read for B 23-08. An ordinance of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Green Valley, Missouri, amending Chapter 650 of the Municipal Code to add a new Section 650.020 regarding the rates of gross receipts taxes for all applicable utilities operating in the city.
Mayor, I move that we accept Bill B 23-08 and make it ordinance 2414.
I have a motion by Alderman Arnold to approve Bill B 23-08 for its second reading, making ordinance 2414. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, this will be roll call.
Now, Alderman Bass,
Yes.
Alderman Cleaver,
Yes.
Alderman Knox,
Yes.
Alderman Mills,
Yes.
Alderman Skinner,
Yes.
Alderman Arnold.
Yes.
Okay, 6-0. This is the first reading of B 23-09, an ordinance to amend the future land use map in the 2014 comprehensive plan.
Mayor, I move that we accept the first reading of bill number B 23-09 and bring it back for its second reading by title only at our next regular session.
I have a motion by Alderman Bass to approve Bill B 23-09 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Knox.
I put Knox.
Any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, this is just the change to the future land use map. So this is that change from single family to business park designation in the comprehensive plan future land use map.
Questions, discussion? All right, see none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
This is the first reading of B 23-10, an ordinance changing the zoning on approximately 4.83 acres from District R1 Single Family Residential District to R1P Single Family Residential District Planned Overlay District, and change the zoning on approximately 11.44 acres from District R1 Single Family Residential District to District M1P Light Industrial Planned Overlay District, and approval of preliminary development plan for Creekside Village Fourth Plat.
Mayor, I move we accept the first reading of bill number B 23-10, bring it back for a second reading at our next regular session.
Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Cleaver to approve Bill B 23-10 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Skinner. Any discussion?
And Mayor, members of the board, this is for the actual zoning change.
All right. Questions or discussion?
I just have one question. Who currently maintains Seymour north of Wolf Creek? Is that us currently?
So we have it to the north property line of this tract right here. We have Seymour Road because it was annexed as a part of taking in the ground to the east of Seymour Road. So we have it basically from McQuarrie to that northern part of this property here.
Currently, we have that?
Yeah,
So nothing changes?
nothing changes.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have anything else? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That's it for ordinances. Next up, city attorney's reports.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, just, we are in full-on hiring mode at this point. I have one new associate joining us on Thursday, which we hopefully will be able to introduce her sometime soon. We have another offer outstanding. We're looking to hire two. We did lose one. I think I had mentioned that previously. We lost one last week. And so it looks like we're maybe making a trade with the city of Kansas City, Missouri. They got one of mine, I got one of theirs, so at this point. So anyway, that's primarily what we've been working on. So just wanted to, we'll see some fresh faces from time to time.
Next up, city administrator staff reports.
We just have one, Mr. Trozen, and his sign.
So I believe at one of your board meetings, there was a discussion regarding by Alderman Arnold as far as proposed signage before public hearings. So this will be a sign that will be placing on property that would have public hearings, such as items like rezoning, variances, before the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And then we would also then post a sign prior to the public hearing before the Board of Aldermen. The sign will be posted, same as the notice for the paper, as well as notice to surrounding property owners, which is 15 days prior to the public hearing.
That is all.
All right. Next up then is Board of Alderman reports and comments. Alderman Arnold.
I just want to extend heartfelt condolences to the city of Herman for the loss of their officer over there and their other officer injured. It's a travesty that any community should ever have to deal with, and I pray we never see that here in our city.
Alderman Mills.
Nothing at this time.
Alderman Bass.
Nothing at this time.
Alderman Skinner.
I just second what Dale said. That's all I have.
Alderman Knox.
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Alderman Cleaver.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, next up, mayor's report. I have nothing additional to add. I believe we do not have a need for an executive session, correct?
Correct.
All right, so anything else? We will adjourn.